Well, I know that I'm going to be dating myself here, but when I was a little boy, I had a favorite record album. Do you remember record albums? Okay. And my favorite record album was called Free to Be You and Me. How many people remember that? Okay, quite a few. Free to Be You and Me was an album of songs and stories for children that was recorded by famous celebrities at that time. People like Marlo Thomas and Diana Ross and Michael Jackson. This was 1972. I was in the 2nd grade, and I used to love to come home from school and play that album on my record player. One of the songs was by the big burly football player at the time. His name was Rosie Greer, and the song was called It's All Right to Cry. And then there was a song by Alan Alda from MASH, which was called William's Doll, and it was about a little boy who wanted to play with a doll. And the whole concept of the album, the whole purpose, was to teach young children that it was okay to break free from the limited gender stereotypes of society, that it was okay for a boy to cry and a boy to play with a doll, and it was okay for girls to play sports. And the whole idea is said in the title. It was saying that it's okay to be free to be who you are. And that to me is what we're celebrating this July 4th weekend, is we're celebrating that freedom. Our founding fathers and mothers, that's why they came here. They came here for freedom and independence. And they wrote a beautiful document, a declaration of their independence, which said that all people have 3 inalienable rights, rights that cannot be taken away from you. And those rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Which meant that their idea was that everybody in this country would be able to live how they want to live, be able to love who they wanted to love, be able to say what they wanted to say, be able to be who they wanted to be, and that they were given the right to pursue whatever way of life makes them happy. What a beautiful thing to found a country on. How amazing. And that's what we're celebrating today. However, we do know that the reality is, in the long history of our nation, there have been many people who have not been able to live freely. I am not just talking about slaves in the 1700s and 1800s. I'm talking about in our own lifetime. In the 20th century that most of us were born into, we know that not that long ago in this country, black Americans had to sit at the back of a bus and had to drink from separate water fountains. We know that women had very limited career options and were expected to stay home and raise children. And we know that gay and lesbian people had to live in the closet. So that's not freedom. That is not pursuing happiness. And so, although we know that that is the reality, we also know that everybody in this room has been living in a very exciting time. I am so grateful to be living at this point in human history, because the consciousness of this planet is expanding so much that in our lifetime we have seen women's liberation and gay liberation and civil rights. And just this past year we've seen rights extended to transgender people. We're living at an amazing time where more and more people are being afforded those rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's what we celebrate this weekend. To me, that's what patriotism means. So what's interesting to me is that the people who seem to be the most obvious patriots, those like flag-waving Americans, are often the ones who want to keep people from their freedoms. Anyone who doesn't look like them, worship like them, believe what they believe, They want to keep them from pursuing their lives of liberty and their pursuit of happiness. I was in the Family Christian store in Holland this week to pick up some communion cups for our church, and it looked like I was walking into a July 4th store, because the whole store was all red, white, and blue, and God bless America. America is not a Christian nation. I don't know how we have equated the two, but it is not, and it was never meant to be. John Adams, the second president of the United States, said, "The United States of America is in no way, shape, or form founded on the Christian religion." Our founding fathers were very clear about that. People like John Adams and Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, they were not church-going Christians. Thomas Jefferson, the man who wrote the Declaration of Independence, which we are celebrating this weekend, he had in his library well-worn copies of the Quran, the Muslim holy book. And he had a well-worn copy of the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu holy book. But he had little use for the Bible. In fact, Thomas Jefferson famously cut up a Bible. He just cut out the words of Jesus and he pasted them in a blank journal. And he said, "This is all I need. I don't need the rest of this book. That's all I need." So somehow we have gotten to a point where being a good American means being a good Christian. And that is not at all what this country was founded upon. So we have Christians today who want to have prayer in public school, who want to post the 10 Commandments up in a public courthouse, who want to have a nativity scene out in front of City Hall during Christmas. And they forget that these are public spaces for all Americans. And America is full of people of all different faiths and people who don't believe in God. And they are Americans who have been afforded the same rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that is what it means to be patriotic, is to say all people are created equal. You don't have to look like me, worship like me, and believe what I believe in order to be afforded these rights. Now, there are some Christians who say, well, on our currency, it says, "In God we trust." And in our Pledge of Allegiance, we say, "One nation under God." Well, our founding fathers did not say that. Those words were added in the 1950s. Most people in this room were alive in the 1950s. It wasn't that long ago that was added to our currency and to our pledge. And it happened during the McCarthy era, when people were being tried for being un-American. That's when those words were added. They are not what our country was founded upon. And it is important that we know this, because there is a large group of people in this country, people who are Christian, who are working very hard to make sure that other people are not afforded their rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And it is important that we, as progressive Christians, know this and know of our history and what it means. A lot of people are not familiar with the founding fathers and what they believed and what their intention was for our country. Now, being patriotic, a lot of people think that that means America is the greatest country. We're number one. That's patriotism. But if you believe that we're the greatest and we're number one, then that means you're saying that everybody else is beneath you. That's not the message of this country. That certainly wasn't Jesus' message. Jesus does something extraordinary in today's gospel. He doesn't keep his followers in their space. He says to them, I am sending you out beyond these man-made boundaries of government and religion. I'm sending you out of those boundaries because I want you to experience what it's like to be the foreigner. I want you to experience firsthand what it's like to be the outsider. Because when you do, you will be set free. And you will set other people free. If you want to live freely, you've got to break out of these boundaries and limits that have been imposed by governments and religion, but also the boundaries and limits that you have put on yourself, whether consciously or unconsciously. I've shared with you before the story of a man cleaning his fishbowl. And in order to clean the little fishbowl, he had to take his 2 fish out and put them in a bathtub. And he noticed that even though the 2 little fish were now swimming in a much bigger body of water, the bathtub, they were still swimming around in that same little circle the size of their small fishbowl. Jesus is saying, leave behind the limits and the boundaries. The universe is vast. You live in a vast universe. Get outside of your own little world and see how other people live, how other people worship. That's what's going to set you free. So my question for you this July 4th weekend is, are you truly living freely? Are you still bound by dogma and by literalism, which is keeping your view of God very small in the small fishbowl? Or are you expanding your vision of what God is? Are you a person who is a slave? Are you a person who is enslaved by your negative thinking? A person who is resentful? A person who is anxious? A person who is worried? A person who lives in lack and limitation? If you're letting those things control you, if they're your master, you're a slave to them. You're not living freely. So, think about it. Are you free? Really free in your day-to-day life? Are you free of those thoughts? Are you free of those things that society has said, this is what a man is, this is what a woman is, this is what a Christian is, this is what an American is? Can you break free of that so that you can do as Jesus instructed, which is to see all people as one? Jesus did an incredible thing in this gospel today. When he sent out his followers to go into foreign lands, he gave them some great advice. He said, don't take anything for your journey. No baggage. Don't bring that with you. Just go freely. And when you go, say to people, peace be upon you. And notice what he said. Don't let any dust gather at your feet. If you go somewhere and it's dirty, just shake the dust off your feet. Shake it off. That's it. That's a wonderful way to live freely. To just go forth and to say, no baggage, everything I need will be provided, and I'm not going to collect any dust. That's what he's saying in this gospel for how to live freely. The whole spiritual journey, it's biblical. The whole spiritual journey is from slavery to freedom. All of us have to look at, how are we enslaved? How am I being bound? How am I not being free? Because the whole spiritual life is about living more and more freely. So, Jesus says, you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. That's how we become free, by knowing the truth. And what is the truth? Well, the truth of your being is that you are not limited. You are unlimited. The truth of your being is that anything is possible. The truth of your being is that the light of the Christ dwells within you. That the power of God is within you. When you know that, really, really know it, then you are free. And when you live freely, you give other people around you permission for them to live freely. So let us go forth and do that this July 4th weekend. Let us become people who let freedom ring within us so that we can let freedom ring in the world around us. Namaste.